It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the films of October 1st, 1999. 4 movies to look at today, so let's go ahead and jump on into it. We'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, and that is George Clooney, Mark Wahlberg, and Ice Cube in David O. Russell's Three Kings. So the story is that you have 4 American soldiers. They go on this gold heist that takes place during the 1991 uprising in Iraq against Saddam Hussein following the end of the Gulf War. So in a way, it's kind of a war equivalent to a precursor to what George Clooney would be doing with Ocean's 11 just a couple years later. But this is the film that put David O. Russell on the map as a director. It was widely acclaimed when it came out. It was a massive hit at the box office. It was also big for a number of other reasons. One, I believe this was actually the first film made about the end of the Gulf War, or around the Gulf War. I could be wrong on that. In fact, let me just double check just to make sure I'm not giving you bum information. I'm not seeing anything else, but I think this was the first studio film that was about the Gulf War, not as a documentary, but as a film written as a straightforward feature film about what happened in the events of the Gulf War. And of course, you have George Clooney coming off. This is the first film he did after leaving ER after 5 seasons, and this was the film that kind of turned his film career around after a couple of stumbles in '97 with Batman and Robin and The Peacemaker. Even though The Peacemaker was a success, but Mark Wahlberg, this was a chance to show his acting chops as well, and Ice Cube as well. I mean, Ice Cube had been in a couple of other films mostly targeted to one specific audience at this point, so to have him opposite guys like George Clooney and Mark Wahlberg, that's a pretty big deal. And John Ridley is another familiar name here. He went on to write the Oscar-winning script for 12 Years a Slave, which went on to win Best Picture. And the movie itself is just a ton of fun. It's a really good, well-made film that just has so many different elements to it that just really are well done. Like, there are so mthink moments featured in this film. Like that scene you see in the trailer where you see I think it's the Humvee that's driving up, and you have the Bart Simpson right there with "I Get Around" playing in the background. I mean, when that's played in the movie, it's played very well. It's a really good, visually pleasing scene to look at, and the film knows how to manage both the elements of both a black comedy as well as a little bit more of a dramatic edge to it. It's a well-made film, and it really knows how to take full advantage of all the opportunities that it has to work with it. It mixes a lot of different elements in there. It makes for a really thought-provoking film. And the performances are top-notch. George Clooney is giving a good performance here, so is Mark Wahlberg, so is Ice Cube, Spike Jonze, Cliff Curtis. This cast also includes a lot of other notable names that you may be familiar with. People like Nora Dunn, of course, Jamie Kennedy, Michaelette Williamson, Holt McCaney, Judy Greer. Jim Gaffigan has a cameo in here, so does Aaliyah Shawkat from Arrested Development. I mean, they packed in some pretty good names in here. Everybody in here works with the material they have here very well here. And like I said, it's a good mix of action, the comedy elements, the comedic elements, the dramatic elements. It's all put together in here, and it's just what David O. Russell does so well, and that's why his name, he really took off after this film came out, and everyone kind of knew what kind of a director he would be, because he later go on to make a lot of other great films of this caliber, that showcases what his potentials were as a director. And it's a great film. I don't think I need to say anything more about this film that hasn't already been said already. If you have not seen Three Kings, you are doing yourself a major, major disservice by not doing so. Check this movie out. So, with that said, let's go ahead and move on to our next movie. Melissa Joan Hart and Adrian Grenier in Drive Me Crazy. And yes, this movie is literally called Drive Me Crazy because of the song from Britney Spears, You Drive Me Crazy, which I'm not gonna lie, it's a pretty damn catchy song. In fact, let's be honest, most of Britney Spears' earlier songs are pretty damn catchy. I mean, but this one right here, man, I listened to it again after I watched the trailer for this, and yeah, that song still holds up pretty well after all these years. But yes, this movie was literally named Drive Me Crazy just because of that. And in a way, it kind of helped the film make probably a little bit more money than probably would have. But since the original title of it was Next to You, which kind of generic of a title, but not that Drive Me Crazy is any better, because nobody's really driving anybody crazy in here. But basically what the plot of this movie is, you have Melissa Joan Hart and Adrian Grenier. They're neighbors, but are from two very different worlds. Despite their differences, their love lives have a common theme. Their most recent plans for love have fallen through, putting them both in a desperate state to fix them. And so they both conspire to pretend to find a romantic interest in each other, with the hopes of attracting the ones who got away from them, leading up to the big school dance. They find out their scam worked out better than they had planned, and take a guess on what happens. No, seriously, take a guess what happens. Even if you've never seen the movie, what you think happens pretty much just happens. And that's kind of the biggest con of the movie, is that we've seen the story done done over and over again. It's nothing new. It's nothing significant. It doesn't really have a whole lot there to really make it something that you have to see. But is it the worst that's ever been done? No, not really. I mean, I like Melissa Joan Hart a lot. I mean, I grew up with Clarissa Explains It All on Nickelodeon, and I didn't even know that Adrian Grenier had been in things before I saw him in Entourage for the first time. He did this, and he was also in Walk to Remember, if I'm not mistaken. But other than that, though, there's nothing really about this movie that's all that interesting. The most notable thing about this film really is the soundtrack and the leading song of the film. I mean, that's the thing that we still talk about even to this day. As far as the film itself goes, it's kind of had its time back then, and then after it came out, it just kind of like faded into non-existence, because most people don't remember the movie it came from. They remember the songs, but they remember that soundtrack. I mean, Jive Records was the big deal back in 1999, but yeah, nobody really remembers the movie itself. I mean, it's just the movie itself is just pretty generic. I mean, it's a typical teen comedy, and there's nothing really new or significant about it to really make it stand out on its own. Of noteworthiness, this is written by Rob Thomas, who later gave us Veronica Mars, and also created Party Down and iZombie. So this was one of his early outings as a writer, because I believe this was the first film he ever written. If I can see here, he wrote a movie called Fortune Cookie, but there's nothing on it, so I'm guessing that's maybe like a short or something. But yeah, like. Well, no, he did write some stuff. Space Ghost Coast to Coast, Dawson's Creek, Cupid, a couple notable shows back then. But Drive Me Crazy, I think, is the first film he ever wrote. One of only two films he wrote. The other one was for the Veronica Mars movie that came out in 2014. But that's probably the only other noteworthy thing about the film. The film itself is pretty generic. It's a movie that doesn't really have anything new that you haven't figured out already, even by me telling you what the plot of the film was. Like, really, you could pretty much figure out what the plot of the movie is going to be just by that premise alone, and how it's going to pan out and everything. And just like, it doesn't really have anything new to it that makes it something that you need to see. I mean, even if you're curious about what Melissa Joan Hart can do as a leading film actress, it's really not worth it in the end, because what you get here is just a movie it's okay, but it's nothing special, and the only thing you really are going to remember from it is that soundtrack, and especially the leading song of the film. I mean, the leading song is the only reason why this movie probably still has any relevancy almost 25 years later, so. Not much more to say about that one, so that's Drive Me Crazy. So let's go ahead and move on to our next movie, and that is The Adventures of Elmo in Grouchland. So yeah, this was the second of only two Sesame Street movies that went to the big screen. I know there was supposed to be another one that was done by Warner Brothers with Anne Hathaway in it that was supposed to be coming out soon, but we've not heard anything about it since the pandemic, so chances are that film's probably dead and buried right now. But this is the second of the two films following Follow That Bird, which I think is the far superior film, because this one it's complicated. What's the premise here? The story basically is that Elmo has this fuzzy blue blanket he talks about and would never let anything happen to it. However, a tug of war with his friend Zoe sends her this blanket to a faraway land in Grouchland, and Elmo's in hot pursuit. Facing life without his cherished blanket, Elmo musters all of his determination and courage and heads off on an action-packed rescue mission that plunges him into Grouchland, which is a place full of grouchy characters, stinky garbage, and the villainous Huxley. And all along the way, Elmo learns an important lesson about sharing, realizing that he was selfish with his friend and responsible for what happened. And, yeah, that's what they want you to think, but when you actually watch the movie itself here, Elmo's kind of a dick in this movie, and really, like, him and Zoe, man, I don't know what is. I've not watched a lot of Sesame Street in the later days. I used to watch it a lot when I was a kid growing up. What kid didn't? I mean, this was a show that I watched it a lot during the 90s, the early 90s. But then by the late 90s, I really wasn't checking it out for obvious reasons because I grew up. And looking back on it now, Elmo and Zoe, something about them are like the ultimate frenemies. Like, not only from this movie, but even by today's standards. I mean, Zoe, when she had that rock and Elmo just lost his mind, and, like, he's just like, it's a rock, it's not a living thing. But you could say the same thing to Elmo. It's just like, well, your blanket's not a living thing either. I'm just saying. But yeah, Elmo's kind of a jerk in this movie. I mean, the movie makes you, that premise makes you think that he's learning lessons in this movie, but really, he spends most of his time talking about the fact that he just wants his blanket back, and he just wants to get it back so much, and there really is not a good lesson to be taught in this film when you really look at it. I mean, this is a film that really, it feels like it was complete. It's another one of those movies, kind of like with Muppets from Space, that feels like it was rushed, and like they wanted it out on a specific time of the year so it could actually get out there in time. Get out there in time for a specific date that they had planned, but it's a film that feels very, very rushed. In fact, the man who plays Huxley, Mandy Patinkin, was not even the original actor they were supposed to get. He actually was a last-minute replacement for another actor that has yet to be identified at this point. And yeah, this is a film that just feels. It does feel like Muppets from Space. It feels like a movie that just feels like they were on a deadline. They wanted to get this out at a specific time. They didn't let them take their time with this film. And this is the last thing that Frank Oz worked on. This is the last Muppet film that Frank Oz worked on before he eventually decided to retire and just go into making movies as a director. And it was also the final theatrical film before Disney ended up picking up the Muppets, and we got the Muppets in 2011. Not only that, it's the last film featuring Carol Spinney, the man who plays Big Bird, following his retirement in 2018 and then his death the following year. And the film bombed at the box office. One, because it opened up in October, and most kids' films, we talked about this so many times, that most kids' films in the month of October do not do well. Early September is mid-September. Yeah, you might get one out here and there, but October, it's very few and far between for this thing to make any money. In fact, this thing was the only family film playing in most theaters at the time, and Sony did not take advantage of it whatsoever. They actually had a scaled-back release for this film, and because of that, it made it very difficult for the film to make its money back. This thing barely made it into 1,000 theaters and brought in $3 million on a $26 million budget. That's not a good sign for this movie. That's something that, with a budget like that, you want to put as much you should put as much money to it, considering the popularity of Sesame Street and the Muppets as a whole. But yeah, Sony was just not the right company to work on the Muppets or Sesame Street, because those two attempts right there to try to create a box office hit off of them were just simply not going to work with the way the studio was working around that time. And the movie itself is just not enjoyable. It's a film that, like I said, it makes Elmo seem more like an ignorant jerk at times in this film, rather than actually the likable character that he was back then. I mean, Elmo was a big thing back then. I mean, who could forget the Tickle Me Elmo era in '96, when everybody and their grandmother was fighting people in the toy stores at Christmas time to get the hottest toy? And I mean, maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's why this movie made him so detestable, because of what the world actually did. What happened to the world after that toy came out. Maybe that was their way of getting revenge on them. But yeah, this is it's a disappointing film. It's a real disappointing film, to say the least. And if you're gonna watch one Sesame Street movie, go watch Follow That Bird, because that film was, at least, it had more to it. There were lessons being taught in there. You did get the sense of a real Sesame Street movie in that film. I mean, it felt like a big Sesame Street adventure in here. And meanwhile, this one, it really doesn't know what direction it wanted to go, and it's a shame, because Sesame Street is one of those things like it's kind of like the Peanuts. Like, it's very. Nobody really has the nerve to try to modernize these characters from what made them so popular all these years. And even when they do, they get people that know what they're doing. I mean, they get people that know what exactly they need to do to make these characters feel as genuine as they do on the TV show. And it's a damn shame. It's a damn shame this movie did not turn out as well as it should have. A major, major disappointment, to say the least, on the Adventures of Elmo and Grouchland. So let's go ahead and move on to our last film, and that is Mystery Alaska. Yeah, this is a movie you probably never even heard about, but you see those credentials there. From the creator of The Practice and Ally McBeal, David E. Kelley wrote the script for this and produced this film. Jay Roach, the director of Austin Powers, made this film too. I mean, those are two big heavyweights in both movies and television coming together here. And not only that, you have a cast that includes Russell Crowe, Hank Azaria, Mary McCormack, Lolita Davidovich, Burt Reynolds, Maury Chaykin, I'm seeing all the other names here, Kevin Durand, Beth Littleford, Scott Grimes, Adam Beach, Mike Myers, Judith Ivey, Megan Price, Rachel Wilson, Michael McKeon, a lot of as Little Richard, Barry Melrose, Steve Levy. I mean, they pack some big names into this movie, and you think that this film should be well accompanied to try to do something very interesting and very unique, especially with the people involved. I mean, for Jay Roach, who had been known at that point for the Austin Powers movies, this was the chance for him to branch out into something unique and different compared to what we had seen in the previous two films he had made. But when you watch the film, it's a major, major disappointment. Nothing really happens in the film, and not even for an underdog sports movie. It's really not that good. It's a film that really is so boring, and at times, like, you really wonder what are they even doing? Like, what's supposed to be the overall message of the film when this is all said and done? And it does what you think an underdog sports film like this would do. I mean, they do change the ending a little bit to something that you wouldn't normally see, but you see this happen in some underdog sports movies. I mean, Bad News Bears is the best example to give you an idea of what happens in the end of this film. But no, this was a real major letdown. This is a film that has way too much talent on this in front of the camera and behind the camera, that this movie should not be as dull as it is. It's a really, really dull movie, and a film that's over 2 hours long. Like, it really needed to be something unique and different and show what these two guys, David E. Kelley and Jay Roach, can do outside of their norm. But the end result is just a mess of a film that really does not have a whole lot there to make it something you need to see. And I was really disappointed with this film, considering the talent they had on board here. I expected so much more from it, and it's a real disappointment. It's a film that had so much potential to it, but it doesn't even have the qualifications of a cliched sports underdog storyline. It's just a boring movie. Nothing really happens in it, and it's a real unfortunate performing film. It's a film that's a major letdown on so many levels, and it's a shame because of all the promise it had, and it just doesn't deliver on it at all. So, real disappointment. So that's Mystery Alaska. So on that note, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. When we meet next time, we'll have Harrison Ford and Kristen Scott Thomas in Random Hearts, Molly Shannon bringing her character from Saturday Night Live to the big screen, Mary Catherine Gallagher in Superstar, along with Will Ferrell, Terrence Stamp in The Limey, got that confused, and Hilary Swank in her Oscar-winning role in Boys Don't Cry. So 4 films to look at next time. We'll delve into those on the next episode. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and also don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this. So with that said, I'm off. I will see you guys next time, and until then, as always, take care.